Hey guys, welcome to the Drive at 5. I'm discussing right now Sam Harris. This is an episode on the nature of reality. This was an episode, I think 134 with Sean Carroll. All right. And he discusses the nature of reality, quantum physics, and how these things affect the way that we view things. Now, there's a lot of really interesting topics in this, on a science level and also I think on a philosophical level, because, the way that we perceive reality is absolutely huge. I mean, how do I perceive reality? Well, first off, it's always changing. That's number one, which gives me the flexibility to be able to, throw out the worst ideas and bring in the best. Now, I want to bring up the idea of what quantum physics is. I am no quantum physicist, obviously, but I do really enjoy hearing about the ideas and the concepts. And one of the main concepts that I want to bring up here is the fact that when we look at reality, what we perceive here in reality is not necessarily what's going on when we look at it up close. We are not genetically selected for, through evolution, we're not genetically selected for seeing the true nature of reality. We're just genetically selected for seeing what works for us, what allows us to survive. Right? It wouldn't make sense, in the savannas of Africa for us to be able to see the particles and the molecules if they had absolutely no, reason to help us survive. Our systems are just, our systems have evolved from, things that have helped us survive. And I'm going to give you a couple really interesting examples of this. Well, first off, as human beings, our brains, right? Our brains have helped us survive. We rely mainly on our eyesight to survive. We want to see, if anything's happening. Right, when you're driving your car, you're using your vision in order to drive it properly. Like, that's a pretty precarious situation. That if you didn't have the ability to see things so well, then so quickly, then you could get into a lot of accidents. And and there's birds out there that have even sharper senses of sight, hawks and stuff like that. Why? Because they fly up real high and they need to they catch mice and stuff like that. And then you have other types of birds that can perceive electromagnetic waves, and that's how they're able to understand in what directions and where they have to go when they migrate. Another example, a beautiful example of an animal that has been genetically selected for, a specific skill that it's been genetically selected for is a bat. A bat sees the world through echolocation, which is amazing. Like, can you possibly imagine what it's like to see the world using your ears? So, there's many different types of ways of experiencing our reality. And as you see, as a human being, this is this is what we've developed. Now, Sean Carroll, really happy to hear him talk with Sam. It was really interesting because he made Sam look a little bit silly, a little bit dumb. I wouldn't say dumb, but just like too much holding on to his pride or maybe his opinions. When they were talking about free will, and I'll get to that pretty soon. The whole idea of free will, which is super cool once again when you bring in these ideas. And quantum physics, guys. So you take a look at reality, and I look at the world, and I see there's a car, I see there's a building, and I see clouds, or let's say asphalt. I look at the asphalt, I see that it's asphalt. But as I come up close, as I come a little closer, I see that it's made up of many different parts. That it's not just made up of one little part, that there are other parts to it. And this is a pretty common theme, that when you look at things in general, the closer that you look, the more you see that those big pieces are made up of smaller pieces, and we don't see all the small pieces all the time. It's just the reality of what happens, because we don't need to. We're not selected for it. It did not benefit us. But I'm going to tell you how it does benefit us, because this is part of what I believe in, and part of what I believe in is using science and using the knowledge that we have in order to better our lives, in order to find the best way to live by using the same methods and strategies that I think science teaches us. Now, looking at reality, it's made up of different pieces. You can use an example. Somebody takes, say, look at this car. You look at the car and it drives by. It's just this big thing that's moving fast. And you say, look at it again. You walk closer. You see that it has doors. You see that it has wheels. Now, one of the closest ways for us to perceive that reality, to see the particles in their smallest forms and electrons, and we find that they act in very, very funny ways. They don't act in the same way that we see it when we're perceiving it. They seem to be moving in either two different directions, either clockwise or counterclockwise. These are the words of Steve Carroll, and there are a couple equations, and this always stumped many scientists back in the past. I believe with Schrödinger, that their physics equations landed them in the situation where they were left with two possibilities of where the electrons were, and there are other examples and other experiments when they would actually shoot photons, shoot the smallest particles, and they would observe them, and when they would observe them, they would seem to have moved. As soon as they observed, the particle had moved. But there was really no exact way to define where it was, because every time that you would be, they would look to see where it is, it would be somewhere else. And Sean Carroll describes it as the particle is either moving clockwise or counterclockwise. What I'm trying to say is that when you look super, super close, all of the smallest pieces of reality that people can see, they're moving, they're popping in and out of existence, or at least our existence of what we perceive. When this stumped many, many, many people, and there was a scientist that came along later on, named Hugh Everett, who suggested that when these particles are when they would almost essentially disappear, that they weren't actually disappearing, that that was their quantum state, that there are multiple possible quantum states of the particles simultaneously. That's crazy. What the hell does that mean to us? What does that mean to in our reality? Well, I read a book by Max Tegmark, which was an amazing book. I listened to an audiobook while I'm driving, and he gave some interesting examples, for us people. Now, when our neurons are passing ions and passing other particles in between them, those very same particles are popping in and out of existence. Our reality, all of our physical selves are popping in and out of existence. And he explained it, that he believes that when people make choices, that any possible non-zero possibility, not just for choices but for anything, has happened essentially. There's an interpretation called the many worlds interpretation, and this is one of the explanations of where the physics goes with this idea that the particles are popping in and out of existence. That there is a state where all of the possibilities of where that particle could be are existing. and we don't perceive it. And these ideas lead, many people, many theorists, many scientists to believing that there are many worlds out there, or at least there are many dimensions where all of the realities, all of the possible things that could have happened are happening, right? And those possibilities bring on other possibilities, which bring on other possibilities, and it's sort of, and they call this the wave function of the universe. That the particles are not just acting like particles, like one particle, but that they're holding all of the possible space of different realities in a different level. So what does that mean practically? Well, some people think that means that when I'm sitting here and I say Josh, I could have been saying something completely different. This very conversation that I'm having right now, there is another Josh having this very same conversation, deciding to say something else. And every single possibility that I could have branched out from my conversation with you has happened and is happening, and that it could be anything. I pick up my hand, I drop my hand. Well, there could have been a Josh that didn't do it. There's also a Josh that's singing crazy things to you right now. That anything possible within the laws of quantum mechanics, physics, is happening. Now, there's ideas that, there's other universes with other laws of physics. That's something completely different. I'm talking more about, the many worlds interpretation. And it's crazy. Like, this totally turned me on. Fucking turned me on like crazy. I was like, what? Like, these are things that we read of in sci-fi, like other universes, like other worlds, other versions of me. I mean, it's so insane. All of the possible branchings, like I'm divorced. I could have got, there's a me, according to this story, that didn't get divorced, that's still married. There's a me that got divorced and had a shitty time afterwards. Meaning there's a me that got divorced and who knows, maybe got addicted to drugs, or maybe became, a gambler, or maybe, played out the negative, possibilities of anything that's allowed in the laws of physics is happening. I mean, that's what they translate this idea of the particles popping in and out of existence to, and that really, really, really turned me on, because to me it said, listen, anything's possible. I mean, don't think to yourself for a second now, you think you know everything, Josh. You think you know so well, that you know everything, and you think that, well, you don't. People, it's counterintuitive. It's so counterintuitive, and a lot of what we experience in our lives, a lot of that reality that we create around us is all based on that intuition, which is great. I'm not saying don't use your intuition, but I'm saying that you've got to question things. You have to question things. There are, the world is so insane and so beautiful, and there's so many different versions of Josh doing this right now or doing something else right now, and I don't know which version I am. And for me, that's an inspiration. It's an inspiration for me because it means that anything is possible. And to me, it means that because I don't know which one of them, and this is just my take on it, because I don't know which one I am, it can be something that can be a little bit scary for somebody. But to me, I found that facing fears and knowing the reality as best as possible is the healthiest way to deal with it. And it excites me. It excites me so much to find out that I could be one of those Joshes who is killing it, who's crushing it. I feel it. And I am crushing it. And it is absolutely amazing. It is absolutely amazing to know that all of these things are happening. So the question is, how to view reality from this. And I believe in building up. I believe in this, in the same way that I believe that the universe was created and everything sort of had steps. That there's no such thing as downward causation, which is something that they brought up in the podcast. That downward causation means that things, things in the external are affecting the internal. How do I explain that? Well, I need to get to do 1 to get to number 2, and I need to have 2 to get to number 3, and I need to have 3 to get to number 4. I don't have 6 gets down to 4. The world's not, the effects of the world don't start from the outside. The effects start from the very base foundations of science and these, creation. I don't know what you want to call it. I don't believe in a creation by another being, but I do believe in an upward build-up of how things have happened, and I believe that we, as human beings, can learn from that sort of build-up. I call it building yourself up. That I try to find the lowest point, my lowest foundation, my deepest points, which is myself, and I try to connect to myself, and I find that to be a foundation of where I want to start and I want to bring my life. I start off with myself. I want to love myself. I want to make my physical self healthy. I want to make my emotional self healthy. And I'm building up from there into my, to my family. I want to be able to create healthy relationships with my family. I want to make sure there's continuity between who I am and what I love and the people around me, that there isn't a distance between that, right? Each step leads on to the next step. And if each step leads on to the next step, then there is a love feeling of continuity, right? Then I have myself, my values, my principles, the things I love, applying that to the people around me. And then that builds up to applying to people, that applies to other people also. And that idea of building yourself up and not getting ahead of yourself, to me, is something that I learned from science. And it's something that everyone can benefit from. Absolutely. We can all work on ourselves. We can all find ourselves, and as we build ourselves, then we're able to branch out to help others, to love others, okay, to create good relationships with our families. And creating good relationships with our families is hard, but that requires creating a good foundation to start from. Now, knowledge. What about my knowledge? What about all the knowledge that I have? Well, knowledge, is something that should be acquired, I believe, in the same way that, or let's say, knowledge should be thrown out. In the same way that science throws out theories that don't work over time. People try to disprove it, and they try to disprove it, and the ones that are disproven are thrown out, and the best ones stay behind. In the same way, we can use that idea and apply it to ourselves. And because these ideas of quantum physics aren't being thrown out, these are extrapolations of the physics, and there's no other explanation for it. And if we as people can take in information and then always cross-reference, we can try to take in other information as best as possible, learn, be humble as best as we can, and then to learn from what's going on around us, and come with an honest mindset, saying, you know what, if I'm wrong, then I'm going to throw it out. And this is, to me, as a very science-like approach to creating, the best idea of reality, the best way to deal with reality, is that we need to see what's around us. We need to understand that we only see a little sliver, and we need to understand that as we gain more information, let's remove what doesn't work, Let's remove what doesn't work. Let's view reality as best as possible. And let's realize that this universe is insane. It's crazy. I mean, there's other universes, there's other things going on. It's fun. That is fun. If that's possible, then imagine, you have no idea of the endless possibilities of all of the things that could happen. I mean, it's so awesome. It's something that inspires me. It's something that gives me meaning in my life. And I want to say thank you. So, this was my first take on the Sam Harris podcast. These are my opinions discussing their conversation. Okay? Because they did bring up something else that was pretty big, and that was free will. Free will is a whole big conversation that they were having about, because they're like, who really has free will? What is, if everything is already preset, if all of the possibilities are happening simultaneously, then what does that mean for your free will? Well, their answer, at least Sean Carroll's answer, which was a great answer, he says, well, psychologically you do have free will. At least it seems like you have free will. And it feels like you have free will. And with people, there's a lot of variables. It's very hard to find out what people are going to do and predict what people are going to do. We're more shifty, as opposed to predicting, let's say, predicting the way that air moves around, or predicting, how a tree would grow, the possibilities, or whatever, other predictions. And people are a lot more complicated. But the free will, is it there? You know what? It feels like it's there. It feels like it's there. And that's the main thing at the end of the day. It does feel like it's there. But know that there is things happening beyond our wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. And that means it can happen. Anything can happen. Anything is doable. Set your mind to something, you will create that thing. Who the hell says that it's not going to happen? Because if it's possible, the laws of physics, it's possible in this universe, even if you dreamt it up in your mind, it's likely, very likely, that you will be able to create that thing, to do that thing. I mean, it is, because if you weren't able to think it up, then it wouldn't be a reality. Your mind is in this reality too. Your brain is a part of this mathematical universe that we live in, and it's creating images that already exist. It's creating images that it knows of. It's creating images that are possible. So dream big, follow your dreams, stay inspired. Science inspires me. I love it, and I'm going to continue talking about it. So thank you for joining me, and thank you, Sam Harris. Thank you, Sean Carroll. You guys are amazing. I really, really love the podcast, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. Drive at 5, Single Parents Succeed. Subscribe below. All right, find us on Instagram at Single Parents Succeed. Join our Facebook group. The ride is just getting started. Peace.